Wow. So this feels weird. Hey, it's Romania Black, and we're on episode 24 of Dororo. This is so bizarre to me. This is the last episode of Dororo. I feel like I started this series a month ago. It is wild. But yeah, we're on the last episode, and I had to record this before I left for my trip because I had to know how this ends. So I am recording this a little bit ahead, but don't worry. I will check everybody's comments when they all come in. I want to say, first and foremost, I want to say thank you to 3 individuals who have commented on this series every single week or nearly every single week. So HBanana7, Anime Annie, and Moomin, y'all have commented nearly every week unless y'all were sick or something, which people don't have to comment in my videos, but they do because they like the shows and they like talking with me about them. But I will tell you all first and foremost, it is such a motivator for a content creator, especially me who likes engaging in a dialogue with the people watching the show. Like, I watch these shows because I want to talk about them, but it sometimes feels like when there's no comments, you're just kind of talking to a brick wall. And it's like, it's still fun and I'm enjoying the show and I love talking about it, but it's even more fun when people engage, even if it's just oh, that was a great episode. That's all it takes. That's all it takes. Even, it doesn't have to be a long novel length comment. As long as it's just talking about the show and creating a dialogue, that's all that matters. So I want to thank these 3 especially, because of all the shows on my channel right now, Dororo just hasn't had a lot of comments, and I don't know if people just don't feel like talking about it, or they're afraid of spoilers and they wanted to wait till the very end, or they just didn't care. Whatever the case may be, and that's fine. If you're just here to watch me for 30 minutes and then go on your merry way, that's perfectly fine too. But I do appreciate the comments. They are very, 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 they've been so kind and fun this entire series, and I really appreciate it. There was a little bit of people against me, like, getting on to Tahamaru, but I want Tahamaru to live, and I don't know if he's gonna live, and I'm really sad about that going into this episode. But thank you all for the comments. I do have 2 I want to talk about from episode 20 before we get started with this episode. One is from HBanana7 that says, Mutsu and Hyogo had the biggest death flag on them. Well, that was episode 20, and episode 23 we saw how that went. I'm honestly amazed they just lost their arms. Well... Although, it was pretty symbolic after Mutsu said that they will be Tahamaru's right hand and left hand men. And I thought that was interesting because we talked last episode about the arms that they lost being the ones that were replaced with HYAKKIMARU's actual arms. And then the fact that they were the right and left hand men of Tahamaru. It's just, how much symbolism can we pack in one episode, right? But then they talked about them and Anime Annie. I wanted to read their comments back to back. Because originally HBanana7 made this comment. I had not read Anime Annie's comment yet. So I responded to them saying, when they said, when the men fleeing the burning house were shot in the head, I was caught off guard. It was brutal, but also kind of humane. Considering this show doesn't shy away from torture, the poor man's death was instant. And before I read Anime Annie's content, which cleared up the context of why they shot the men, because that was lost on me during the episode discussion, and when Anime Annie said it, I was like, oh, okay. And my dogs are being ridiculous. But I was kind of like, I told HBanana7, I was like, that line, it was so brutal, but also kind of humane. I kind of hate that line, and I know they didn't mean anything bad by it. They were just saying, like, the other people were being tortured, so, this death in comparison is merciful. But that line just really struck me in a way, because I'm like, there is always a third option. And the third option was, they just don't kill them or torture them. You don't have to do it. And I was just like, oh, it was so frustrating. Because I feel like, and this was nothing against HBanana7, but I feel like in other shows that I've watched, a lot of people have given the thing, well, it has to be one way or the other. And I'm like, no, there are so many options that you can go through. It is simple and efficient to say there's only one way or the other, but if you've watched shows like this show, like Attack on Titan, like other shows, there are so many options. But it's the question of, do you want to go through the hardships of choosing that option and what they entail, or do you want to take the easy way out? And I feel like either torturing or saying that the shooting them was an act of humanity is just so messed up and not correct, in my opinion. I'm like, no, you could have not done that, actually. But, and somebody will say, well, and this to Anime Annie's point, they pointed out, and I had not noticed this. They said it's a sadly realistic portrayal in episode 20 of the times for what they used to do when epidemic started, closing off the village it's at and killing anyone who tries to leave so as to prevent it from spreading further. And here's the thing, like Tahomaru and Hyogo hadn't caught the disease, but here's the thing, Anime Annie, I had not thought of it that way and be like, oh, they were killing people so they can't go spread the disease. But here's the thing, that's still not correct. The funny thing is, Anime Annie points out in their comment that we've learned so much after the fact to know that, no, you don't have to kill everybody that gets out of quarantine. It'll be fine. We can do other things to help prevent the spread of disease, but this series gets so complicated. But one thing that I loved about the last episode was that Dororo was like, there doesn't have to be this choice A or choice B. There's choices C, D, E, and F off in the wings. You just got to think of them and rationalize with them. And that's kind of what I loved about last week's episode. So, but I'm glad y'all pointed that out, because I think that those are some definite topics that are worth discussing with this series, because it is so complicated, right? So I'm really excited. I love the idea that when this is all said and done, I can go look at the 1969 anime on my own time and check it out and see that, because that's going to be really fun to look up clips and do some comparisons. Like, that could be really fun. So that's going to be a lot of fun. And I'm sure people will have recommendations in the comments of certain clips from the original series to go see. That would be fun too, because where do you start, right? But so we're on the final episode. Obviously, something's got to give between HYAKKIMARU and Tahomaru. I don't know how they're going to end it. I don't want both of them to die. I don't want Tahomaru to die, but I don't know how. And we see that the moms, Jukai and HYAKKIMARU and Tahomaru's biological mom, are coming apparently to the tower. So it's like, what do we do with that? And then Daigo, he's in the middle of battle. What do we do about him? Poor Mutsu and Hyogo are dead. Midoro died valiantly, like a flaming steed from hell. But yeah, what do we do with that? So I don't know, y'all. I honestly have no clue how they're going to end this show. And I'm really excited to see what it is. So anyway, we're not going to waste any more time. I've talked enough. Thank you all so much for joining me on this journey. But we are going to start episode 24 of Dororo. And we're going to do that here in 3, 2, 1, and I'll see you all on the other side. There is actually a lot to say about this final episode. Oh man, y'all are just tuning in after this reaction, but I just went through going on a deep dive into the Dororo, the manga versus the anime versus the new anime, and there are some stark differences, and I think we should talk about them. Because I'm probably not going to read the manga. It's only 4 volumes is the original manga, and there's some story behind that I want to talk about. And then the 69 anime has 27 episodes instead of 24. And there are some things I'm kind of baffled about, and I want to talk with you all about it, because the manga and the 69 version versus the 2019 version have a lot of differences. And there have been some updates, which I think we need to talk about. But yeah, I'm going to save those till the very end. I want to go through this episode first. And it's very hard because I don't know whether I should interject things about the series or but so we'll just talk about the episode outright and then go back through the 69 original manga and anime versus this. But man, the issues I had with this final episode, once I looked into the original series and the 69 anime, all of it was explained. And I suddenly realized why. I was like, but why did they do that? And now I understand why. Because it was a paying homage to Osamu Tezuka and their original vision. So Dororo is an Osamu Tezuka manga creation. Osamu Tezuka wrote everything. They've just wrote everything. Now, I say that because this is the 3rd series of Osamu Tezuka that I've actually watched. This is my third, the second on this channel. The first one that I watched when I was a small child called Unico, which was an Osamu Tezuka series from the 70s that was adapted into an anime in the 80s, and it's storming outside, so that's probably the thunder you're going to hear. My dogs will probably bark about it. But so that was my first foray into Osamu Tezuka, and I remember that series from a small child. I reviewed it on my channel last May. It's been almost a year. It's been almost a year since I reviewed Unico. Why has it been almost a year? Oh my god. But I did review it on the channel, and so you can go check that out there. But I really love Unico, and I've heard of Astro Boy, so I knew kind of about that, so that when I watched Pluto on the channel, that was kind of a reimagining of it, but it sticks very closely to some of the central themes of Astro Boy and doesn't stray too far away, I don't feel like, without spoiling anything. I can't talk any more about it. You'll have to go watch Pluto. But this is the third series I've looked at where it was an Osamu Tezuka series that has been adapted. And in order for them to keep relatively with most of the themes and endings of the original, they had to make some choices. And these choices, I was like, oh, we're going to talk just the episode through, and then I'm going to go through and talk about the original manga and go through the wiki page and everything. As a teacher, I don't usually prescribe the wiki page, but it is a nice condensed summarization of all the things that I can research, so we'll go back through it. But oh man, this episode, I didn't want it to end. I wanted to keep going. I wanted to see what was going to happen. Again, you could have made this series 2 episodes longer, and I would have been on board with it. Like, come on now. I mean, Trigun went beyond 24 episodes. Neon Genesis went beyond 24 episodes. Why not this, right? Why does it have to be 24 episodes, right? Why do we have, can you just add in like a cherry on top? Biwamaru getting left behind as the others go and do things felt very on point for his character, which I was happy about. And I do like that he helped out HYAKKIMARU's mom in the end and supported her. That was great. And then we had the support from Jukai there at the end. And the mom saying there was once a cry that should have been heard in this land, but no sooner than it was uttered that it was silenced. And that idea of mercy, the idea of showing mercy, and that they should have showed the child mercy and not thrown them to the wolves, and all of that coming, like the reaping what you sow, that all coming full around. To go ahead and jump the gun, I am actually okay with Daigo getting spared at the end. I'm kind of okay with it, and I'll explain why. Because he was left with nothing. And I hate that Tahomaru died. I hate that he died in this. I was so mad. I was like, no! Because we'll talk about it when we get to that point. We'll talk about it, but son of a bitch. But I do love the fact that Daigo was like, my son's going to take over for me. I'll be a demon to rule alongside him. Our kingdom will be prosperous. And he was left with nothing. He was left with a kingdom on fire. His wife, his son was gone. He was left alone, and HYAKKIMARU wasn't. And he wasn't even given the satisfaction of being killed and revenge. HYAKKIMARU was like, no, I'm better than that. I've learned some things. Bye. And stabbing it through the samurai helmet. It was just really good. It was really good. I thought for a second he was going to kill him, because when Daigo said he would just do the same to another person, I was like, oh, you got to go. But I think this was a more fitting ending, because death would have been... I feel like Daigo wanted death, and this was... As the thunder is outside. And this was, you know, a more fitting end, that no, you don't get the sweet release of death. You have to live with your choices now. Although he looked like he was about to die in the Hall of Hell, like the way that he was bleeding. He looked like he was about to die, so maybe he did end up dying. But it wasn't blood on HYAKKIMARU's hands. That's the thing. And I guess in the end, I thought the HYAKKIMARU would kill his dad when I started the series, and him sparing him subverted everything from the start that I thought with his character, and it all comes full circle, so I'm fine with that. I think that that's okay. But yeah, so we go through the OP, get into this, in this episode with the Hall of Hell, Dororo and HYAKKIMARU. We'll talk about this later on, but... So yeah, the demon in the Hall of Hell. I feel like there were a lot of moments in this finale. I feel like Mappa and the studio were constrained by limits that they had with this series. Like, for one thing, having to be 24 episodes. We've talked about the pacing in some other places. But I feel like Mappa had some really cool ideas of what to do, like with Tahomaru's character and with the demon and the final demon, and they just couldn't do it. I'm not saying they weren't allowed, but it felt like they just couldn't go through with it because it would change the story too much from the original. And I don't know if they just didn't want to disrespect Tetsuka's work and they didn't want to strive to get too far from it, because there is a burning mansion in the original. There is a burning mansion where all this takes place, but it's very different. But I don't know if they just maybe didn't want to stray too far because they didn't want to disrespect Tetsuka's work, and changing the story too much would have been a step farther than they needed to go. I don't know if that's what they thought, but I felt like the battle between Tahomaru and Dororo, or Tahomaru and HYAKKIMARU, I feel like it had so much potential. Like they were showing, I thought the symbolism of when Tahomaru's eye gets slashed and his one good eye is blinded by the blood and he's looking through HYAKKIMARU's eyes. That part was, okay, let's talk about that part for a hot second. I'm guessing because it was the demon possessing the eyes, that part was weird to me, because it was, in hindsight, it's weird to me. In the moment watching the episode, I'm like, oh, that's really cool because his actual eye gets blinded and now he's seeing the world the way that HYAKKIMARU sees the world. So that's the irony, right? HYAKKIMARU is going to get his eyesight back. Tahomaru loses his eyesight. But then when you think about it, you're like, well, wait a minute. If Tahomaru has HYAKKIMARU's other eyes that he's going to get, and those are the eyes that are going to allow him to see, why was it blinded? Why were they blinded? Is it because they weren't connected to HYAKKIMARU and that's the only way to activate them? That world building's kind of weird. I was like, wait a minute, does that make sense? I don't know if that makes sense. But anyway, I thought they had some really cool things that they did with their battle and the sword play. I did look up, and this was considered one of the best animated series of 2019. Okay. Choices. And I do like the animation overall. There are parts of this episode that there are facial expressions, and there are some things, especially between Tahomaru and HYAKKIMARU, that are really, really well done. But dang, there's some parts of the anime that I was like, oh, Mappa, your budget ran out, didn't it? And it just kind of feels that way, which is fine. But and the part that got me in this was, I will say, Tahomaru's dialogue during the battle, I get that he's riled up. I did love the part where HYAKKIMARU cut the boards, and it reminded Tahomaru of him and Hyogo and Mutsu and them measuring themselves, because like my parents did that with me as well. Like I thought that was so well done. Like that was such a heartfelt moment, and you could see why it would make Tahomaru angrier and more upset, right? So I thought that was really well done. But then in the same breath, he has that moment, and maybe it's because he was riled up, but he's like, how dare you stay in the castle of Daigo? And I'm like, bitch, you brought him here. You brought him to the castle. What did you think was going to happen? Did you think you're just going to kill him and not shed any blood? Excuse me? And he's like, this is no place for you. And HYAKKIMARU's like, oh, this is Daigo's castle. He's like, well, then it should be mine. And then they go back and forth about it. Anime Annie commented that both of these boys, there's an interesting comment about nature versus nurture, that they're both so much like Daigo and how stubborn he is. And I was like, yeah, that's a very good statement to make. But yeah, when they're like, this is my castle, I was born and raised here, and I played here and trained here, I'm like, you're the one who lit it on fire! I just want to be like, in that moment, I was like, Tahomaru, you're the one that lit it on fire, and I see you allowed it to get lit on fire and burn up. I'm like, I get what he's saying in that moment, but at the same time, I was like, dude, this is not HYAKKIMARU's fault that you led him here to trap him and kill him. That's your own decision. So I'm like, you could have led HYAKKIMARU anywhere if you didn't want this place to become collateral. You could have literally taken him anywhere, but you chose to do it because you thought it would be the most advantageous. I'm like, I had no sympathy for that part of the monologue. I'm like, this is kind of your fault that this is happening. And the thing about it is, whenever he's going about giving HYAKKIMARU the speech, he's like, well, this is my house, and this is my castle, and my father gave me that desk and those horses. And HYAKKIMARU was like, I was stripped of my skin. Tahomaru's entire speech fell to kind of deaf ears, because it was sort of like he's sitting there telling about like the privileged life he's had because of his parents, but the one thing he couldn't have was his mother's love. And Hyakimaru's like, that wasn't my fault. I was like, Hyakimaru's like, you should go talk to your father that you idolize because it's kind of his fault that all this is happening. He's like, I was literally ripped of my limbs and skin, and I had no say in that matter. He's like, I didn't choose this life for me. And a lot of it is just Tahomaru projecting his own insecurities, that his mom, was unwell and was sad about losing her son, and he didn't understand what was going on, and he just blames that on Hyakimaru, and it's really Daigo's fault. But yeah, and the imagery was so good throughout this scene, but I was like, my dude, he's like, she's my mom, not yours. And Hyakimaru's like, well, he's like, you were never here. Nothing here is a testimony of your existence. And that's when Hyakimaru was like, well, why is it? He's like, you were here always. He's like, yeah, unlike you. Then why are you lacking? I like that Hyakimaru's like, why are you complaining? What are you missing that you're chiding me about? And I love in that moment that Hyakimaru kind of realizes, he's like, oh, this is what Jukai was pointing out. This is what everybody's been trying to say. I'm human, and this is how humans are. We can have the world in front of us, but we always want something else because that's just what we believe we are owed. And he's like, okay, I kind of get where this is coming from in that moment. You're lacking just like me. Yeah. He's like, I'm lacking my physical body parts that I'm trying to gain back from the demons, and you're lacking a sense of love that's more spiritual, it's just like they both have what each other doesn't have, and that's humanity in a nutshell. And I like Hyakimaru coming to this conclusion, right? And he's like, well, you took my mother and Mutsu and Hyogo away from me. And I was like, well, your mom left on her own accord and you also ignored her. But I know what he's saying. He's saying that she's talking about her feeling sad. I'm like, technically Daigo took that away from your mom, so it's kind of also his fault. But Mutsu and Hyogo were killed by Midoro. That was not Hyakimaru's fault that the horse killed them. That was not his fault. So again, I was like, you might want to backtrack there. I want you to give back this land and everything. And Hyakimaru was like, no. So yeah, they go through fighting each other. Again, the castle's burning down. Dororo's trying to figure out how to get in. The mom's like, I'm going to go do it. Jukai's going to go in. I mean, am I surprised that the mom and Jukai were going on a suicide mission to the burning castle? Am I surprised? No, because Jukai and the mom have been on suicide missions this entire series. They have been waiting for the opportunity to die, and now was the time. But my thing about that whole scene was, I'm sorry, they could have got out. They could have got out! Jukai's a strong-ass man. He could have lifted Tahomaru up. They could have followed Dororo and followed Hyakimaru out. They could have climbed up that thing. They could have got out. Somehow they could have made it out one by one. If Biwamaru could have lowered the mom down in there and pulled Hyakimaru and Dororo out together in the same they could have made it work, right? I feel like it was a little bit of a cop-out death that they just chose to not move. And I felt bad for Tahomaru in that scene because I felt bad for Tahomaru, and we're going to talk about why. But yeah, so they end up going up there. Now, in that moment where Tahomaru is up against the pillar and Hyakimaru has the opportunity, he could have killed him. He could have killed Tahomaru, but in that moment, he looks past him, and as he gets him up against the pillar, right, where he's going to go to, and there's a line there, the spike, and he goes to hit his head, and in that moment, he sees Dororo, he sees the mom, he sees the Mother of Mercy, everything that's connected. And he's like, nope, I'm not gonna kill him. There was actually the swipe with the animation, the swipe where the mark above the pillar is that misses. It was there right when he backed up against the pillar. I don't know if that was an animation error or what. But yeah, Hyakimaru could have killed him. And instead he spares his life. He's like, why didn't you slice through me? And Hyakimaru has just He's like, you could have severed my head and you could have, gotten your eyes back. And Yakimaru's like, well, but I realized after we talked it out a little bit up a level above that I'm human. And am I happy that Hyakimaru came to this realization and spared his brother's life? Yes. Do I think it was a little rushed? Yes. But they at least showed us where the Mother of Mercy came in and all of that, and thinking of Jukai and his mom. They did show us that, so it makes sense. I feel like it was a little bit like we've been battling this entire time, and then we finally talked, and now I've completely changed my tune. It's fine. I don't have a problem with it. It did feel a little bit rushed. This entire episode felt a little wee bit rushed. But yeah, he's like, well, I don't know. I'm human, so... And then he's like, I've always been losing to you. Now, then, all of a sudden, the demon from the Hall of Hell, like, the two of them are about to have this, like, brotherly moment. And I was really excited about that, where they're about to, like, look at each other, have a brotherly moment. It's really great that you're, like, sharing, like, Hyakimaru was smiling at him, like, hey, bro, it's all gonna work out. And I got really excited, because I was like, this is what I kind of wanted. I wanted the two of them to walk off together and sort things out, realize Daigo's the problem, and then make it work. That's what I wanted. And for a hot second, I thought we were getting that. And then the Hall of Hell acts up, and the final demon, the 12th demon, gets really pissed, and he, like, makes Tahomaru go crazy. And I was like, what is this? Why is Tahomaru going wild? And Hyakimaru takes a step back, and he says, 'tis my chance to fulfill the contract. And he's like, demons don't give up easily, do they? And this part was weird. Now, it will make more sense when I tell you about the original series and the 1969 version. It will make more sense. But right now, it doesn't make much sense. So I was like, one, what is this demon? Because at this moment, he's like, oh, well, I'll give these back to you. And he just pulls out the eyes from his own head, which... What? And not only does he pull the eyes out, he offers them up to Hyakimaru and they just poof, vanish into dust. How does that work? What was the mechanisms of that? That's not how this works. No, that's not how this works at all. I was like, none of the body parts that we've seen before from Hyogo or Mutsu, they didn't just evaporate and reappear on Hyakimaru's body. That's not how that worked. Right? The demon completely disappeared and the body parts were just given back to him, which it's a world building thing. I'm fine with that. That's okay. The thing that was weird was when he gives the eyes back, Hyakimaru, like, gets it back, and in this moment, all of a sudden, this demon, like, appears in the middle of the palace, which we'll talk about this in a second. But for this series, the 2019 series, that makes no sense. Like, why didn't the demon appear earlier? And where was it this whole time? Has it been hiding in the castle this entire time? Why wasn't it at the Hall of Hell? A part of me thought that maybe they would go to the Hall of Hell to try and face the demon there. But nope, the demon came to them, which we'll talk about it in a little bit. The other thing was that, remember back in the Sarlacc pit, where that Sarlacc pit, like, took Hyakimaru's entire leg and caused a bunch of shit to go down? It was really hard. This thing appeared out of nowhere, and all Hyakimaru had to do was go bloop and stab his swords down to its heart, instantly knowing where it was, and then poof, end of story, we defeated it. It took him 30 seconds. There wasn't even a battle. He just went bloop. That was it. And I was like, oh, that felt like a final boss at the end of the level that was unnecessary. I just felt like, I don't know. For reasons I'm going to tell you later, and this will make sense when I talk later about the original series, I think it would have made more sense if you had made, and I know why they didn't do it, but hear me out, if they'd made Tahomaru become the demon. Because for a second, when the demon started to, like, react and Tahomaru was reacting and his eyes got all wide and purple, I thought the demon was going to possess Tahomaru to fulfill the contract, and Tahomaru was going to become this demon, And then Hyakimaru was going to be like, well, shit, I got to stab my brother to kill the demon and get my eyes back. I thought that's how it was going to go. And they could have done that. And then Hyakimaru could have sliced the demon, got his eyes back. Tahomaru could have regressed back down into his human form and then died in his mother's arms. And that was it. You could have easily done that. But they chose not to. And instead have this demon appear randomly in the castle for reasons that only the original manga people will understand. And then he ends up stabbing them, but then the castle starts to collapse. I did like Hyakimaru's like Sailor Moon transformation where his hair came undone and he started to get his eyes back. And then his mom shows up. I felt bad for Tahomaru for 2 reasons after this happens, when he collapses. I felt bad for 2 reasons. One was that I'm glad Jukai saved Hyakimaru from getting, crushed. The mom, I am glad she got to hold her son. I am glad she got to hold her son, have that moment with him, get to do with him what she had not gotten to do with him as a child. I'm really glad for that. And I felt a little bad for Tahomaru because she's over here holding Hyakimaru, and then Tahomaru's like over there bleeding in the floor after he just had a monologue about how his mom always liked his other brother more than him. And here she doesn't even like look until she like has her moment with Hyakimaru, and then she looks up and she's like, oh, you're here too, Tahomaru. And it's like, so I felt bad for that, even though I get that she needed to hold Hyakimaru first and have that moment with him. I get it. But then the other thing was, like, did Tahomaru want to die? I don't think he did. Like, whenever she's like, well, we'll be together forever now. I was waiting for Tahomaru to sit up and be like, actually, I want to save the people. Aren't we going to go save the people? And then she's like, no. Because Tahomaru's whole thing was about preserving the land and protecting the people, and he would do that until his dying days. And it's like, so is he not going to do that, I guess? I guess not. I guess we're not going to have that. He doesn't get to fulfill that wish, right? I kind of wanted him to live, even if the mom had died, or, I didn't know if like the mom would die saving Hyakimaru or something like that. But I kind of wanted Tahomaru to live, so that he could go and try to fix things that his dad couldn't fix, and that to like remedy and be like, oh, we don't need to kill Hyakimaru to heal the land. Let me show you how, because that's his whole goal. But instead, he just decides to go out like Hamlet, being like, well, my best friends are dead. My mom's going to die. I don't want to deal with my dad, so peace. And I was like, that just felt, but it will make more sense when we talk about the manga. It'll make more sense. Trust me. I went on a deep dive with this and I was like, oh my God. I did like the end where she's like, she can finally hold him and she cries and she's like, how I love you so dearly. And then he leaves. And I love that Jukai is like, oh, I'm your mom too. And what I should have given you wasn't arms or legs, but instead it was like mercy and love. Let a human and not a demon reside in your bloodstained body. I do like the Mother of Mercy statue that he passes on to Hyakimaru, and then Hyakimaru takes Jukai's words and passes it on to Daigo and leaves it to Daigo, and he leaves it to Daigo to make the decision of whether Daigo passes it on or not. I thought that was really great. I loved that. I felt like Hyakimaru in this episode, for losing both of his mothers and his brother that he just finally had peace with, like, he didn't show a lot of emotion. And I know in the original he doesn't, but I was like, damn, you just lost your entire family in like one go round and you're not going to cry? We're not going to scream about it? We're not going to let out any emotions? We're just like, yeah. At least for Jukai. At least cry for Jukai. I mean, granted, he just got his eyes back. But, yeah, he leaves them. And then they go take care. But Jukai was totally fine. Jukai could have grabbed Tahomaru, slung him over his shoulders, and helped her get out of there. They could have totally done that. There was no reason for them to die in that flame. She's like, well, I guess we'll just die here because these two suicidal maniacs are okay with it. And yeah, she's like, forgive me for making you feel so lonely. Like, the thing of it is, she's like, I'll stay by your side forever. And he's like, okay, I guess I'll die now. I'm like, Tahomaru wasn't even mortally wounded. He just had like a cut to the forehead. He literally just had a forehead wound. he wasn't gonna die. There was no reason for the three of them to die in the fortress. There was no reason for that. But they had to tie it all up because that's not how the original ends. So we'll talk about it. But at the time, I was like, and I don't know, would it have been that hard to have changed the ending? Would Tetsuka have been that mad at you if you modernized the ending? Because you modernized a lot, let me tell you. You modernized quite a bit. But no. He ends up dying, and then it's just, that's that. Now, okay, so Hyakimaru, here's my other part that I was like, I do love seeing the gleam in Hyakimaru's eyes. Like, that part was really good. I loved seeing that. That was great. And as they come up, though, I do like the thing where Dororo's like, we're saved, and is commenting on Hyakimaru getting their arms back, and how that's a good thing. And then when Hyakimaru said the sky is pretty, I really liked that. I thought that was a really good moment. But then Hyakimaru was like, oh, you can see the sky. And then Hyakimaru looks down at Dororo and says, oh, well, Dororo, you are pretty. And Dororo's like, well, shut up, whatever. Now, I don't know how to feel about the whole Hyakimaru and Dororo getting together at the end. I don't know how to feel about it. I'm very torn because on the one end as adults, I kind of ship it and I get it because Hyakimaru's like what, 16, and Dororo is what? Dororo is, how old are they? I want to see, how old is Dororo? They're 8 or 9, and Hyakimaru is around, in the manga, Dororo is around 8 or 9, and Hyakimaru is around 14 or 15. So they're like 6 or 7 years apart. Okay. So they would be either, 6 or 7 years apart. So if Hyakimaru at this point is 15, let's say, which this 15-year-old, let's age them up a little bit and say that Hyakimaru is 17 and Dororo is 11. So 6 or 7 years. Like, let Dororo get to be like 19 and then Hyakimaru would be like 25, and we could work with that. And I feel like the end of the series kind of has them at that age when he looks back, he's in his 20s and Dororo's like about to be 20, and that's like they're both like meeting up again. I'm okay with shipping them at that point. And Dororo's just, Hyakimaru's just saying Dororo is pretty just in general, like the sky, and Dororo gets all flustered about it, like, Aniki, I don't know how I feel about it. On the one hand, the romantic in me kind of likes an adult Dororo and adult Hyakimaru together. But then a part of me is like, is that why they had to split up? Because would it be weird for Hyakimaru to watch Dororo grow up and develop feelings? And is that inappropriate? Is that weird? What do we do with that? But then the other part of me is like, why do they have to be split up? They spent this whole time saying they're going to be together, and we just randomly make them split up, which the manga explains it. Don't worry, we're going to get to the manga and explaining it. But I was just like, oh, okay. So they just have to split up now after they've been through everything together so that Hyakimaru can go soul searching. But what? We'll explain it when we get to the manga. And the original series. But yeah, I don't know. I'm torn about it. I mean, I kind of like to ship them together, but in the same vein, I'm like, I hate that they get separated. That part makes me sad. And so then, yeah, everything's on fire, and Daigo, this one dude that's like, hey, I've come to tell you some maybe badsy news. Your entire home's on fire. Your mom and son might be dead. I'm like, this guy has to be the messenger, and he just pieces out afterwards. Daigo took it pretty, but Daigo also has like blood on his mouth during that one scene with the message. So I'm like, was he dying even then? Or in that moment, as he's hearing it, so in that moment while he's telling him, Daigo, like, did he bite the inside of his lip and that's why he's bleeding, because he bit his lip? Interesting. And he didn't want to say anything or show emotion? Interesting. So then it says, yeah, to fend off the Asakura army, innumerable men lost their lives for Daigo. And the final demon statue crumbled and fell that day, which we'll talk about here in a minute. And yet nobody was there to notice it. I kind of liked that. I kind of liked the idea that the demons lost, but nobody, because they want attention and they want glory, and that's been tied to Daigo, and in the end, nobody's there to watch them crumble. I kind of like that. I kind of like that theme. That part's pretty good. And I liked the idea of Dororo using the money to help the little village with all the people that were disenfranchised, and Dororo's like, I know what to do with this money. I'll give it to the village, and we can all rebuild it. But I guess my thing was, why does Hyakkimaru have to leave and go soul searching? I felt like he was going to go take the seeds and grow a rice paddy and then make it to where Dororo would get the rice that Mio and them had always wanted. Like, I felt like that was the case, but why did Hyakkimaru have to separate their ways from Dororo? Why? There was no reason for that. Why couldn't he stay and help rebuild the village? And they could talk and get to know one another. Why is there this weird, I can't be around while you sexually develop, but I'll come back when you're all ready and to go? And I was like, but why? Because it's literally what it kind of feels like. It's like, well, Dororo, it'll be awkward if I watch you sexually mature, so I'm going to go off and make a rice field and go explore around and see the world. And when I come back, you'll be ready to marry me. And it's like, but you could have stayed and helped out the village. What? So, I don't know. It just strikes me as weird. It strikes me as a little bit outdated, but we'll talk about that in a minute. But I do like the idea that Dororo has figured out how to help the village, and Biomaru's like, well, that's a good use of your money, so they don't have to rely upon the samurai anymore. I do like when Biomaru talks about them once being a samurai. I'm one of the samurai. I thought that was interesting, and I don't know if that's Biomaru saying that they're, living off the people, or that they're causing problems, kind of like what Hyakkimaru was doing in fighting the demons, but they don't ever really go into detail with that. But yeah, so Hyakkimaru goes up there to see Daigo, and the two swords sitting on either side of him. I really wondered if Daigo was expecting Hyakkimaru to try to kill him, and if Daigo was ready to fight him. It could have gone several different ways. I was like, I didn't know if Daigo was going to try to fight Hyakkimaru, which we'll talk about in a minute. I didn't know if he was going to see if Hyakkimaru would just kill him, because that could have happened, or what he was expecting, or if he was going to stab himself. And we end up getting kind of like the better of the scenarios, that Hyakkimaru's like, I'm not a demon like you, and no matter what you've done to me, I'm still a human. You can just take this statue and make yourself better. It was like the perfect insult was Hyakkimaru being like, hey, this helped me. Like, I just put the Statue of Mercy down, being like, maybe it'll help you too. Like, it almost was more of an insult to Daigo for Hyakkimaru to kind of class him up in that moment. And I kind of loved it, because I was somebody that I wanted Daigo to pay for his actions, and he kind of does have to bear responsibility at the end, and I kind of love it. I kind of love it too. So yeah, meanwhile, Biomaru's like, well, maybe he's got to go. Maybe he's already gone. Why would he go without telling me? That is a very good question, Dororo. Why would he go without telling you? And he says, well, now calm down. The boy has just been born. No, not because he regained his body, but his heart and his mind. Which I guess he did get that back. And he's like, he has to leave the path of evil and retrace the path of humanity. But again, Dororo is not going through the path of evil. They're doing the path of humanity too. So why do they have to be separate? I don't understand that. And he's all alone. If he walks down the wrong path again, you may not be safe. That's what he's gone off to check. So it's like, Hyakkimaru's like, I gotta make sure I can be a human. But then the thing about that is, Hyakkimaru did the right thing. He chose to take the path of humanity, and he left the statue with Daigo. So, like, he should be fine. It just felt like a cop-out ending. We can't have them be together, even though this entire series has been about them being together. But we're going to make them go separate ways until Dororo's old enough to bang Hyakkimaru, and then we're going to let them get back together. He does stop by the tombstone of Mio there, though. So, although now, I do like seeing Dororo older. The one thing was, like, Dororo being older, I kind of wish that Dororo had kept... I mean, their hair was up in a ponytail, so it's fine. And they look kind of the same. They maybe look a little bit more girlish. And then they show up at Hyakimaru at the very end, who has not changed his clothes in 10 years. So there's that. But then, yeah, he turns around and sees Dororo, and I guess we're supposed to be very happy that they're going to get together, which I would love to see them, together for a little bit, like an epilogue or something, not just Dororo running towards him. So, but I do want to talk about the actual series itself, because the actual series itself, as I've come to find out, has a lot of differences from this anime. So if you don't want to know things about the original series, this might be where we need to part ways or come back for like the last minute, okay? But if you do not care if this is spoiled, because it's from like 1969, right? So if you don't care about that, then you can keep listening, and if not, skip to like the very last minute or so. But so I looked up this series now. I knew that it was originally 4 volumes. I knew that. And I knew it was originally adapted in 1969. I did watch the first episode, but that's all I saw, right? So I went back and watched the last episode. Watching the first episode and then the last episode of the 1969 version is a choice. And I kind of want to go back through and rewatch the whole series now. So we're going to go through like just the highlights of the differences, right? So Dororo was a Japanese manga series written and illustrated by manga artist Osamu Tezuka. Tezuka's childhood memory of his friends pronouncing Dororo, or thief, as Dororo inspired the title of the series. So it was serialized 1967 to 1968. A 26 episode anime series was adapted by Mushi Productions in 1969. It bears the distinction of being the first entry in what is now known as the World Masterpiece Theater. And then it was also made into a live action film in 2007. And then Mappa adapted it in 2019. So, anyway, so the plot revolves around a ronin named Hyakimaru and a young orphaned thief named Dororo during the Sengoku period. So, the thing about it is that Daigo in the original did not make a pact with 12 demons. He made a pact with 48 demons. 48 demons! Yes, indeed. So, to rule the land and increase his wealth and prosperity, and in return, he promised the demons anything they wanted that belonged to him. This enabled him to them to roam free and commit atrocities in the countryside. So, in the original, the mom sets the baby adrift. It's not that the baby was taken away from the mom and the midwife was supposed to kill him. The mom, took the baby to, be set adrift so that he wasn't killed by his dad. Very, Moses style from the 10 Commandments. And then Jukai finds him, and he's in this series. In the original one, Jukai is a medicine man who uses healing magic and alchemy methods to give the child prosthesis crafted from the remains of children who died in the war. Yes, you heard that correctly. So yeah, and it says, as a result, the boy became nearly invincible to any mortal blow. So I do appreciate that Mappa's version is much more realistic. It's just some damn good prosthetic materials, and Jukai's an inventor and is able to create prosthetics. Although the idea of Jukai creating prosthetics from the bones of war-torn children is wild, and I kind of am here for it. Respect to Tezuka, because that is dark and grim and crazy, and I'm kind of here for it. But they chose to go the more realistic route with it in the series, so that's fine. So, grafted onto his left arm was a special blade that a traveling storyteller presented to Jukai, believing it was fated to be within his possession, given that if ever since the boy had been discovered, the doctor had been visited by ghouls and goblins and what else. So they have a story apparently in the manga and the anime in the original 1969 anime about the blade's origins, that it was forged to kill goblins and supernatural entities. So that's kind of cool. So that's probably one of the episodes that we don't see in the Mappa version. I feel like the version of the 1969 Dororo is much more episodic and much more like a lot of 60s and 70s shows that were just like week to week, villain of the week, little tidbit of the week. Whereas the 2019 version of Dororo tries to just have the through line of 12 demons instead of 48 and all of that, right? So I think that there's pros and cons. There's apples and oranges. I like the through line maybe a little bit more than the vignette series, but I could see people being partial to it as well, because it does give you a little bit more kind of oomph in that regard. So, after the sensei was forced to send him on his way because he was attracting demons, the young man learned from a ghostly voice of a curse that had been set upon him at birth, and that by killing the demons responsible, he would reclaim the stolen pieces of his body and thus his humanity. So, he earns the name HYAKKIMARU, and on the hunt, he comes across Dororo and travels by his side. When HYAKKIMARU met Dororo, he had already killed 15 demons. So that's important. So 15 of the 48 had been killed. So throughout their journey, HYAKKIMARU killed 6 more demons, bringing the total to 21. Along the way, he learns that Dororo is hiding a big secret. Dororo's father, Bandit Hibikuro, hid money he saved up on raids to the Bone Cape to later be distributed to people squeezed dry by the samurai. So in the original series, the whole intent was, in fact, what Dororo came to the conclusion for, was that the power was to be used to give to the people to get away from the samurai. So it kind of always, that part stayed the same, which was fun. Itachi, a bandit who betrayed Hibikuro, sided with the authorities and ended up causing his death, right? So, fearing that the mom would die, she prayed to Buddha and with her blood drew a map that would lead them to Bone Cape. And 3 days later, she froze to death. So the original series has a lot more mysticism in it. Like Tetsuka's getting a little bit more magical with it. So the mom in the original, they didn't use, again, they went with a more realist. I guess that's why the tattoo was throwing me off in the 2019 series, because they don't give an explanation to the whole disappearing ink, reappearing with the heat thing. They're just like, yeah, that seems realistic. So they just kind of go with it. In the original, she literally like drew the map with her blood and prayed and had it spiritually, imbued into the skin. So it's a little different. It's a little different. So Itachi kidnaps Dororo and uses the map to go back to Bone Cape, the cave of impermanence, as we see in the 2019 version. A mysterious boatman ferries him to the cape and heads to demon sharks. One of the sharks eats half of Itachi's bandits, while the other is left with the boatman. But they manage to kill the shark, and then Dororo is able to separate the boatman and the shark, and HYAKKIMARU arrives, and that's pretty much, that all happens the same way. So the boatman told the thirsty bandits of a spring not too far from camp, and when they go to drink it, leaving Itachi, Dororo, and the boatman, HYAKKIMARU and Dororo later find their corpses and blood leading to the half-blind shark. And so apparently, in the original, the shark ends up living, and HYAKKIMARU gets his voice back by killing the shark that killed Itachi and the other bandits. Now, there's probably something you're noticing about this point in the story, and I'm going to get to it here in a little bit, but I was like, oh. But anyway, so HYAKKIMARU and Dororo managed to escape Itachi's bandits. Itachi's bandits end up getting killed by the shark that they didn't kill the first time. HYAKKIMARU kills the shark that he didn't kill the first time and gets his voice back. So, Itachi went to search for the money, but only found a letter from Hibikuro saying he'd hidden it elsewhere. So that's a little bit different from the 2019 version. The magistrate arrives under the pretense of getting rid of the bandits, but actually came for the treasure. So, HYAKKIMARU, Dororo, and Itachi kill them, but Itachi was left for dead, and HYAKKIMARU and Dororo carry on their journey. So, at this point, Daigo's men show up looking for the treasure that they've heard about as well. They've heard about Dororo's dad and his treasure as well. It's not a well-kept secret like it is in the 2019 version. There ends up being a scuffle, and Dororo and HYAKKIMARU are like, well, that was that, and they keep going on their journey. Sometime later, HYAKKIMARU learns that his father Daigo was possessed by the 48 demons and goes to slay him. Things are going badly in Daigo's land, and the citizens are forced to build a fort for him. The slaves are planning on a rebellion, but one of the slaves tells Daigo of their plans, and he was prepared. His archers shoot and kill many slaves, and the remainder hide in a tunnel that they'd built under a fort. Now, by this point, before I get into the climax of the manga, you may be noticing something that I was like, wait a minute. And that is the fact that there is no Tahomaru in the original version. There is no Mutsu. There is no Hyogo. They don't exist. They're just not there. And I was like, oh. I was like, so they weren't there at all. Oh. And I felt two ways about that. One, I was like, okay. So that's kind of cool that Mappa added this whole new character, and and a whole storyline about him. And I can't imagine the story without him in it. So that's wild. Okay. But then the other part of me is like, well, hell, if you added him in this story and all the stuff that goes around with it, you didn't have to worry about ending the story differently. I guess the reason they had to kill off the mom, well, we'll get to why they had to kill off the mom. We'll get to that point, because watching the last episode, I was like, oh my God. But we'll get to that point. But they had to kill off Tahomaru because he doesn't exist in the original. He was never there. He was an anime-only character. So they decided to kill him and Mutsu and Hyogo off to round up the story so that it can relatively end like the original. I was like, oh. But I don't know. Would Tetsuka have been mad if they had changed the story at the end? I guess maybe he would have. But he let you put in the characters, so... Which I can't imagine this story without Tahomaru. That's the crazy part. I can't imagine watching this story without the parallels of the two brothers and without the two brothers and their story. I can't imagine it. I just can't imagine it. But anyway, so Daigo gets possessed by the 48 demons and they're planning a rebellion. HYAKKIMARU leaves Dororo and runs into the fort. So you end up with the burning building just like you did in the season finale here, except instead of Tahomaru and HYAKKIMARU fighting, it's Daigo and HYAKKIMARU fighting, right? So Daigo's soldiers capture Dororo like they do in the newer version, but then Daigo becomes like a traditional mustache twirling villain, and he asks HYAKKIMARU to kill Dororo, and if he does that, he'll, let him come back into the fold and be the heir to the kingdom. And of course, HYAKKIMARU is like, no, and does not go along with that. So he ends up stabbing this manifestation of the 48 demons, which appears in the fort like it does in the season finale of this version, which I guess is why they kept it as it originally was. But Daigo and the others managed to escape. And so Daigo ends up escaping alongside his wife, who shows up just like she does in the finale. So then HYAKKIMARU gets his eyes back because the demon gets stabbed and realizes then that Dororo is a woman. And I do like that in the original manga, Dororo rejects the notion and keeps referring to himself as a boy, despite HYAKKIMARU. One thing about the manga and the original manga that I was a little bit like, about is that, again, this is 1960s, civil rights, all that fun stuff. Ladies could, in the U.S., vote for 40 years, but this is Japan, so it's a little bit different. But it was a little bit like, I pursed my lips. Dororo's like, well, you can still call me a boy. I'm kind of, been recognized that way. And HYAKKIMARU, once they can see that Dororo is biologically a woman, they're like, you should act more feminine. And I'm like, okay, show. Okay, gender norms. But this is in part, the manga says, because Dororo was raised as a boy in order to be tough. And HYAKKIMARU wants Dororo to fight alongside the farmers because Dororo's father was a farmer. So HYAKKIMARU gives his sword to Dororo in the manga, the one that Dororo had wanted throughout the whole series, and HYAKKIMARU plans to continue his journey alone, agreeing to meet Dororo when his body is whole, and they part ways. And then, which in the manga, it makes sense because HYAKKIMARU's like, look, some of these demons have escaped. I got to go hunt them down, but you need to stay here and help the farmers regain their land and go find your dad's gold and help them do that. And when I get my body back and I'm completely whole again, then I'll meet back up with you. And in the manga, it takes like 20 years for the rest of them to be slain. And I was like, oh, okay. So the manga and the 69 anime and the 2019 anime all end differently. They all have slightly different endings. In the manga, I kind of respect the fact that Tetsuka had HYAKKIMARU go gain his body back, but was like, hey, Dororo, you need to stay with the people. You need to help them. Your dad has all this power that can help them do that. Daigo's gone now. Daigo escapes with his wife and they leave. That's a thing. They both live and go somewhere else. And Hyakimaru, I respect it because Hyakimaru decides to go get his body back. Dororo stays to help the farmers. That part all makes sense. That splitting up works. And it's kind of weird that Daigo and the mom escape unscathed, but everything else is destroyed around them. So it kind of feels fitting. The only thing that's not fitting is Hyakimaru wanting to make Dororo be more feminine. And I'm like, can we kibosh that a little bit? But that's my modern self talking. But then the 1969 episode, the last episode, episode 26, is wild. So at this point, where the 69 episode is, there's a lot that happens in 26 minutes in this episode. It is just like all over the place. So we get past the OP, and the final episode is called The Final Demon, episode 26, which is not Dororo and Hyakimaru. So in this episode, it starts with the samurai like dragging people behind their horses, and Dororo and Hyakimaru are like, this seems really weird, so let's help. I want to talk about this TV series, I guess, as a whole, the 1969 one, before I get to the final episode. I want to talk about it because there are some things that are out of order. I'm getting ahead of myself. Some things that are out of order about it that I wanted to talk about. So it says Tezuka created a 13-minute full-color pilot to summarize Hyakimaru's birth, his upbringing, and his first meeting with Dororo, and an abbreviated version of the tale of the monster Bandai. The series was produced in black and white coloring due to budget cuts, but made the demons look more weird and menacing. It's funny the 1969 version had budget cuts, and so probably did Mappa. So it's kind of funny that they both suffered from the same thing. That's really funny to me. It says because the original manga was canceled before Tezuka had a chance to shift the focus towards Dororo's coming-of-age story as he had originally planned, most of the plot revolves around Hyakimaru's battle with supernatural monsters. This considered viewers to note Hyakimaru as the main character from episode 14 onward, and the series was retitled Dororo and Hyakimaru. The early cancellation of the manga series meant there was not enough stories for the required number of episodes. So episodes 14, 15, 18, 19, 20, 23, and 25 were original stories developed specifically for the TV series. The penultimate episode being anime only is wild to me. But again, this is back when the anime wasn't like necessarily building an arc, but was more episodic. So you could have 7 episodes of anime only content because it's not really. I've dealt with that with Natsume's Book of Friends. I mean, the thing about Natsume's Book of Friends is there are some anime only episodes, but you really can't tell unless you're really trying to look for it, because the creator of the series works on those episodes that are anime only, and they feel like they're just part of the show. But there's like little tiny things that kind of make you wonder if they're anime only. And so I imagine the same thing was here. I wondered if the manga was canceled because it was only 4 volumes, and Tezuka usually writes like a lot of freaking manga for a series. So that's interesting. I kind of wish that Tezuka had been able to finish telling Dororo's story. I would love to read about a female protagonist in a samurai world like Dororo. That would have been a lot of fun. It would have been cool if Mappa had kind of like maybe worked with Tezuka to create that sequel, but who knows if that would have happened. So, but anyway, so the episode 1 is the one that I watched, which is pretty similar to episode 1 here, The Tale of Hyakimaru. I like that the series is renamed Dororo and Hyakimaru, which is what the last episode's called. That part's really interesting. I like that. But anyway, so episode 3 has the Bandai and Mio and all of that. Like, that all happens like 3rd episode in. Like, the rule of 3 on anime, that hits right there, right? That is wild. So we have that stuff happen, and then there's the Tale of the Misery Chronicles, where they walk in the heat, and then we have the backstory with Dororo's family. We get a couple episodes for that. The Demon Sword, Nihil, we have those episodes. Banmon, episode 8, with the Asakura Spies, we get all of that. Banmon is like a 3-parter here. And then the Fair Fudo is the Waterfall of Vanity. We get that whole sequence there. So there's a couple anime-only episodes, and then we have Bira Bira the Sea. Now, the whole stuff with the shark happens around episodes 16 and 17, like it does here. And then we have the Thunderfire Dog, which is the stuff with, I think that one was anime only. And then the Moth Mother and Sabame, we get that whole deal in this as well, which is a fun time. And then the Great Man-Eating Tree is anime only, which that part seemed pretty cool. And so then we have the final demon. So in this episode, Dororo sees a bunch of samurai mistreating the farmers and the volunteers and asks to help them out. And then there is actual child murder in this 1969 version. I was like, shit. So there's they kill a kid, and HYAKKIMARU intervenes and kills the samurai because they killed the kid. But he refuses to stay and help in the rebellion. Instead, he's like, I gotta go find my body parts. So HYAKKIMARU is a little bit more, he doesn't quite gain his emotional, self back like he does in the original series, right? Or in the 2019 series. In the original series, he's a lot more cold and does not have like the compassion and emotion that he gains in the newer version. But yeah, all the people are being mistreated by the samurai, and Dororo decides to stay behind and help the farmers. And HYAKKIMARU's like, look, I would like to stay and help, but I gots to go and get my body back. So you stay here. I'm going to take my sword and go face my dad. And that's pretty much what happens. So he just leaves. And HYAKKIMARU continues his journey alone, facing demon after demon, while Dororo participates in the rebellion with the farmers in the 1969 version. And a year goes by in this episode. A year goes by, which none of that would make sense in the 2019 version because of the way we crafted the relationship between Dororo and HYAKKIMARU. Could you imagine getting the end and HYAKKIMARU just goes off for a year and Dororo's like, what are we doing? But yeah, that's exactly what happens. Dororo stays to help the samurai or help the farmers against the samurai. And then a year passes while he's fighting demons and gaining his body back. And we see HYAKKIMARU like fighting clam monsters and crabs and all this stuff. So then Daigo appears. Daigo looks a lot like he does in the 1969 version. So HYAKKIMARU only has one more demon left to kill to complete the list of 48 he needs to recover his body. Now, I do think the manga handles it best. I like the idea of the manga. I kind of like the manga in the 2019 versions the best because I think the 2019 version gives a nice sense of closure to everything. It may seem like it's wrapped up very abruptly, but it does have a nice sense of closure. Whereas the manga, I like it too because it leaves it open-ended at the end, but it's HYAKKIMARU saying like, hey, I'm going to go face the rest of the demons. I've got my heart back. I know I'm good. You're going to stay here and help. We're all good. I got my eyes back. I'll just go get the rest. I'll defeat the other demons and then we'll meet back up 20 years. Peace. But in this episode of the 1969 version, that's not what happens exactly. Daigo shows up and he like stabs into the demon in the Hall of Hell. Dororo's been kidnapped. There's snow. HYAKKIMARU's like slaying beasts left and right. He faces the Nui, which is fun. You see it for like a hot second in this version. I don't think it's as impactful as it is in episode 20 and 21, but whatever. So then he gets his arm back. He's like, one more body part and I'll be normal. Where's the 48th demon? The 48th demon turns out to be with Daigo in the 1969 anime. He gets possessed by it, which is crazy. And he's like, your dad is the demon now. And so HYAKKIMARU gets some of his eyes and stuff back, and he goes to face Daigo. Dororo's been kidnapped, and Dororo's afraid that they're going to get killed along with the other farmers. And then this old woman shows up, telling him the last demon to slay is his dad, who sold his soul to the demons to gain power. And then he discovers that it was Daigo all along who was leading the uprising against the farmers, because that wasn't known throughout the entire series. So then, just like in the manga, Daigo orders HYAKKIMARU to kill his prisoner Dororo to show his loyalty. And in the 1969 anime, Daigo orders HYAKKIMARU to kill Dororo. And HYAKKIMARU was like, no, I'm not going to do that. It's Dororo. I love them. And the mom shows up. Daigo's wife shows up. And she doesn't want HYAKKIMARU to kill anybody. She doesn't want Dororo to die. So she stands in front of them being like, hey, husband, let's not get hasty. And he murders her. Daigo kills the mom, straight up slices her, like on the screen, just slices her. And I was like, oh, I did not record my reaction because I was like, I'll just watch this. It'll be fine. I got to that part. I was like, oh my God. Like, no, don't do that. But yeah, he slices the mom in front of Hyakkimaru, kills his mom in front of her, and then starts to kill his own men in this rampage. And so insane. So yeah, so Hyakkimaru is of course pissed about all of this. And Dororo's like, how could you? And so Hyakkimaru's like, what I like is that Daigo challenges Hyakkimaru initially to a duel, and he's like, well, I don't have a sword in which to slay women and children with, which is kind of a little holier than thou. I like the way they handle it in the 2019 version. But Daigo slaps him. There's the moment where the mom dies. It's all really bad and sad, and Daigo reveals they sold himself to a demon. Everything comes out about Hyakkimaru's body and everything being stolen. And then Daigo runs back into the Hall of Hell in the 1969 anime is pretty connected to the castle they live in. And so then the mom dies asking for Hyakkimaru's forgiveness, saying that you must have suffered for so long. And she like tries to apologize. And it is actually genuinely like her dying in Hyakkimaru's arms. It is very sweet. I kind of like the way the 2019 version does it because they've built up their relationship a little bit more in the 2019 version, and it comes across more as earned, where her dying here is just like, it feels like such a shock that she just dies because Daigo went crazy because of the demon. And she asks Hyakkimaru to call her mother, and then she dies. And it's this really sad scene. The spotlight's on her body. And then I will give credit to Dororo's voice actress in the 2019 series. I watched this with sound, the 1969 episode 26. Dororo sounds exactly the same. The voice actress for Dororo in the 2019 version says Aniki the same way the 1969 version does. They sound so similar. That part was great. But then they're like, oh, is this your mom? And Hyakkimaru is like, see to it that she's buried properly. Yes, she's my true mother. And then here's the thing. Hyakkimaru says in this version, my mother likely suffered even worse than I did. And Hyakkimaru, he cries in the 1969 version about her, which is really sad. And so I do want to say that Hyakkimaru does call Jukai his father in the 1969 version because gender norms, who can't make Jukai a mom. It's 1969. But I kind of like the modern version where Jukai's the mom, just like the other mom is. I do like the mom gets a little bit of recognition in the 69 version from Hyakkimaru, like she does in the 2019 version. But then Hyakkimaru looks to Dororo and says, if you become a mother, don't be a sad one like my mother was. And that's how Dororo figures out that Hyakkimaru knows that she's a girl. That's how Dororo figures out, is Hyakkimaru saying that. And then Hyakkimaru says, well, Dororo, I knew that you're a woman. And Dororo's like, oh, well, what are we going to do with this? I hope you'll find happiness living with the villagers. And this is where it goes to. Hyakkimaru decides being like, hey, you be a good mom one day. Don't be like my mom, but I'm going to leave you with the villagers to sort things out. And it's like, what the fudge? But yeah. She should grow up to a mom alongside the villagers, and then he chases down and fights Daigo. Now, I do like with the whole dad claim that when Hyakkimaru chases down Daigo into the Hall of Hell, that he recognizes Jukai as his father and not Daigo. I thought that was pretty interesting. But basically, the final battle is in the palace that's burning. The palace is connected to the Hall of Hell, so they're one place. So it is a really cool set piece for the final battle in the 1969 version, to have Daigo and Hyakkimaru battling in this Hall of Hell around the demons. I will say, if you go look up episode 26 on YouTube, go to the fight scene, because it is really cool. The lighting's neat on it. I think it's neat to see all the demons watching them as they battle. It's pretty epic. I thought that was kind of cool. I liked the way that it was done. But then they're like, Daigo, have you looked at your own face? And he becomes a demon. So Daigo becomes a demon in the end and is possessed by them, and he battles Hyakkimaru, and Hyakkimaru ends up killing him. So I kind of like the way that the 2019 version handles Daigo. Like, doesn't give him that death. It just leaves him kind of alone. But yeah. But then Hyakimaru goes, "Oh, Dororo, live well. I don't want to be around anyone now. Forgive me." And I was like, no! I was like, what? He's like, "I can't give you the sword that I promised." This is the part that made me kind of mad. Is because, here's the thing with the 1969 version. In the manga, it makes a lot more sense. I'd say of all three versions, in the manga, it makes the most sense for Hyakimaru and Dororo to be separated, because Hyakimaru in the manga has to go get his other demon body parts back. He's worried about Dororo being in danger, and now Hyakimaru can see, and he's like, "I don't want to watch you be in danger, so you let me go handle this. I can see now. I got this. I'll come back. You're helping the villagers with the money. We'll sort things out. When I come back, we'll get together." And in the manga, it makes sense. I'm like, okay, cool. In the 2019 version, the newest version, it makes a little more sense than the 1969 version. It makes a little more sense that Hyakimaru has just gotten his heart back, all of his body parts back. He wants to go on a journey of self-discovery. He wants to go see the world. Why he couldn't do that with Dororo, I don't know, plot. But he had to go off and do his thing. Dororo helps the villagers, just like in the manga. And then they meet back up again when they're older and they can get together. Fine. The 1969 version, Hyakimaru left Dororo to help the villagers and was like, "You'll be happy here." And I was like, they're in a rebellion. Like, you left Dororo in the middle of a war. Okay. And then defeats Daigo, gets their entire body back. But in the 1969 version, whereas the manga had Hyakimaru give Dororo the sword that was his, that Dororo kind of coveted, gave Dororo the sword and said, "Hey, you're going to help the farmers. Here you go." In the 1969 version, Hyakimaru was like, "I gotta leave now and go by myself, and I don't need to see you right now, Dororo. Just don't ask questions, let me go." But then they said, "I would give you my sword, but you're a woman. You should have no need for one." And then walks off, not giving Dororo the sword. And I was like, what sexist piece of shit is this? Because, I mean, one, Hyakimaru hasn't seen gender norms this entire series. They didn't even know Dororo was a woman till they could have eyes again. So why'd they have all these preconceived notions about what women should have or not? Because you couldn't see yourself, so that's bullshit. But two, you left Dororo in the middle of a rebellion. She needs a sword! Girl needs a weapon to defend herself. What are you doing? And you're not even doing the white knight staying behind to help her. You're just like, gotta go figure out my shit, but no sword for you. The 1969 version's end, I was just like, what the world? And so then, as Hyakimaru walks away in the 1969 version, Dororo shows up to the wreckage, and one of the guys like leans down beside her and says, "Well, you can't hold it in. You can't cry forever." And Dororo's just like distraught. And they're like, "Until we've worked together to build a good village and a happy country, we'll have to work hard. And the samurai are gone now, so we should focus our energies on building our village." And Dororo's like, "Bro, I'll live with the villagers and have enough happiness for the both of us." Oh, and then the dog ends up staying. Noda, the dog that's super cute, ends up staying and be like, "You'll be lonely without Bro, but you can't cry. Bro's watching over us somewhere, and it would just make him sad." And then, like, let's live our lives with zest. Lives our life with zest is great. But yeah, and then Dororo goes frolicking with the dog, and that's the end of the series. And I'm like, the 1969 version ends so wild, and it just, even though I like the Daigo and Hyakimaru, like, alternate universe battle than the 2019 version, I hate the sexist, "Well, Dororo doesn't need a sword, she's a woman. Bye, lady, I'm gonna go find myself." It's bizarre. At least the 2019 version is modernized. That's a much better. But I was really sad about Tawamaru being 2019 anime only. Wild. Crazy. So, honestly, even though I like parts and pieces of the original manga, like I like the explanation of why they have to be separate at the end until they get back together, I think the 2019 version's my favorite because I really can't... I feel like a lot of the storytelling, which Tezuka as a manga creator, I mean, his style feels very old school fairy tales. They're not going to get into crazy, yeah, some of them do. I don't want to say that. Some of Tezuka's works do get into crazy deep concepts. But the original manga for Dororo, I don't know how profound it gets into the symbolism and storytelling and character growth and development like the 2019 version does, you know? And that's me being biased. I'm sure people that watch the 69 version would be like, it's actually very deep and there's all these different little things and layers you can pull back. I'm sure that there is. I'm sure if I watched it, I could pull stuff together. But what I like about the storytelling, the modern storytelling with 2019's version, is that you have Tahomaru's story. You have more development with the mom. The fact in the original that Dororo didn't even see the mom to like the last episode and they don't get that conversation. Like, as somebody that's very character driven, I really like the concepts of the dialogues that were created in the 2019 version. I thought that was all really, really good. So, you know, what can we do? But yeah, what a wild series. I did want to talk about the Dororo, the anime from the 2019 series. I did want to talk a little bit about, there was one part I wanted to bring up with it, and that was the reception, that people had a pretty good reception about this. They did think episode 15 is weird, which I now that I know that it was, you know, made by that specific creator, I'm like, that's fine. That's all right. But yeah, I thought that it was, I liked the idea that people seem to have good reception for Dororo, and the fact that it was stated in the reception, they said that this one reviewer still recommended the series despite everything to those that liked Berserk and Demon Slayer because of the narrative style and the heavy fights. I do think this was a great series to follow up Berserk. I feel like there was a lot of similarities and aspects to Berserk, although I will say I do like Berserk more. It's weird to say that, but I do. I liked Dororo. Don't get me wrong. I thought this series was good. If anything, I'm kind of mad that Tezuka was not allowed to finish writing Dororo's backstory, which I kind of want. I want to see Dororo's coming of age story. I want to see them work with the farmers. I want to see them meet back up with HYAKKIMARU. I guess that's what fan fiction is for, but there's so much potential in this series that I would have loved for it to be longer. I enjoyed this series. I really liked it. And the characters of HYAKKIMARU and Dororo, and HYAKKIMARU's story of gaining their body back and getting their humanity back. It wasn't anything like revolutionary, but it was still really good. It was satisfying. And this series left me wanting to watch more. And there isn't more, and I'm sad about that now. And I've talked for an hour and 15 minutes about it. So yeah, but oh my gosh. I'm so sad this is the final episode. I definitely am going to watch some parts of the 69 version, I'm sure, in my spare time. And I'm going to try to maybe look up some fan fiction. I don't know how I feel about Dororo and HYAKKIMARU, though. I'm curious to hear your thoughts down below. That could get weird. We'll see. But the series that is replacing this one has already been decided by Patreon, so we're going to start that next week, and I'm really excited. I haven't started filming it yet, obviously, and I know nothing about it, so I will be going in 100% blind, and that's an exciting thing, so yay. But I'm very curious to know your thoughts about this series down below. Did you watch the original 1969 series? Did you read the manga? What were your thoughts in comparison to this one? Have you seen both? Which do you like better? I kind of like that we have 3 different versions. It reminds me of Trigun a little bit. In Trigun, it's the same characters, but each iteration is a little varied, so you may like one version more than the other. And having looked into the 1969 anime versus the manga, there are differences, and I think that's interesting. To me, I think the 2019 version's my favorite, but I kind of like and respect the ending of the manga. The ending of the anime for 1969, I was like, oh. When you come from this version to that one, but I want to hear your thoughts down below. So in any case, I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe. Take care. Thank you for joining me on my journey with Dororo. It has been a lot of fun. It's been a good time. I will definitely be talking a little bit more about this when we do our end of the year roundup. Don't you worry. But in any case, I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and I'll be back very soon next week with a brand new series and more reactions. Bye.